Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker was a disaster that pleased no one. It went too far in walking back The Last Jedi to please the entertainment media complex, but it didn't go far enough to win back the fans. The end result was a movie which came in at a final price tag that was much, much higher than Disney and Lucasfilm will ever admit, but which saw its audience slashed in half since The Force Awakens, and which was ultimately outgrossed by the R-rated Joker. As ourselves, Doomcock, and others covered extensively at the time, The Rise of Skywalker went through multiple different iterations before landing upon the cut that was released upon the audience in theaters. However, among the cuts that didn't make the cut, one was rumored to have been overseen by George Lucas himself. In this video, we will begin by addressing whether or not the Lucas cut really exists, or if it's just all wishful thinking. Then we'll explore how the Lucas cut differs from the release version of The Rise of Skywalker. And finally, under what circumstance Disney could consider releasing it. First and foremost, the Lucas cut is not a Snyder situation. In the case of Justice League, Zack Snyder was the official director who wasn't replaced by Joss Whedon until later in the game, and in a very public manner. Zack Snyder is even credited as director of the release version of the movie, even if he maintains he has never seen it, and tacitly expressed nothing but contempt for it. Despite all of that, the entertainment media complex still spent years denying there even existed a Snyder cut to be released, right up until AT&T announced they were going to finish it up and release it on HBO Max. In the case of Rise of Skywalker, however, there was never any high-profile change of directors, nor was George Lucas formally announced to have ever taken any kind of involvement with the movie. Instead, the information was leaked through backdoor channels to 4chan, to Doomcock, to ourselves, and to others. It should be noted that virtually all of these spoilers and rumors were later vindicated, either by the finished movie itself or by more official production reports released later on. And in among all of these rumors was the involvement of George Lucas and the subsequent Lucas cut. Still, since the entertainment media complex never received any press release confirming the official involvement of George Lucas while the movie was in production, denying the existence of the Lucas cut is now the default position. Among the outlets that have covered the Lucas cut, MovieWeb are the most mainstream, and they merely reference Doomcock's report without doing too much verification of their own. If the Lucas cut rumors gain more traction, chances are its existence will be denied, just like the existence of the Snyder cut was denied. However, there is circumstantial evidence suggesting that the Lucas cut exists every bit as much as the Snyder cut. First and foremost, Bob Iger, CEO and undisputed boss at Disney, has himself confirmed in his management training book disguised as a memoir, Ride of a Lifetime, that as part of George Lucas's deal with Disney over the sale of Lucasfilm, he is required to act as a consultant anytime Disney asks him to. They don't have to negotiate any new deal, they don't have to listen to what he has to say, and they don't have to announce they have enlisted his services. But whenever Disney says, "We need you to come over and give some notes and directions on this," George Lucas is under legal obligation to do just that. Secondly, we know that the movie went through multiple iterations between the start of production and release. Case in point, Matt Smith was announced as the movie's villain, but then everyone kind of forgot about that when Emperor Palpatine was announced as the movie's villain at a much later juncture. Another actor that was widely reported to have had a role in the movie while it was in production, but who never made it in the final cut, was Hayden Christensen, reprising Anakin Skywalker, and we'll have more on that in a moment. Finally, we have the rumors, aka inside word coming to us from our sources, whose information has been proven to be accurate with time, and they maintain that there is a Lucas cut. Based on all of that, we at Midnight's Edge feel confident that the Lucas cut of The Rise of Skywalker is indeed real, even if the entertainment media complex will probably deny it with even greater conviction than they denied the Snyder cut. To be clear, we are not saying that the Lucas cut is ready for release. It exists as a rough cut with incompleted color timing, special effects, score, and sound mix. Getting it into releasable condition would most likely cost double-digit millions worth of post-production still. Before we move on to the question of whether or not it might ever be released, let's explore how the Lucas cut differs from the released cut. The details of how the Lucas cut of The Rise of Skywalker differs from the released version comes from our good friend Doomcock, and although we are not able to either add or detract from the validity of these rumors, they do line up with the information we heard and reported while the movie was in production. According to Doomcock's source, the Lucas cut is about 40% different from the theatrical version. with about 50 minutes that are revised or replaced. The source then described 2 key scenes from the Lucas cut. The first scene occurs after Rey thinks she has killed Chewbacca in a struggle with Kylo Ren. Rey is alone on the Falcon, struggling with feelings of shame as anger threatens to lead her to the dark side, and she asks out loud, "Why is this so hard?" Out of thin air, someone answers, "Life is a struggle, but in the struggle we become better." Rey looks up and sees the Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker standing right beside her. Anakin then reveals to Rey how the Emperor survived in Return of the Jedi, using the Veil of the Force and the Emperor's Sith mirrors that allow him to access the Veil's powers. The second scene happened when Kylo got the vision of Han Solo sent by Leia to try and steer him away from the dark side. In the Lucas cut, when Kylo speaks to Han, he is joined by Leia, who force projects herself into the scene. And then the two of them are joined by none other than Luke Skywalker, giving audiences the on-screen reunion of the original cast they had been clamoring for. The effort of this force projection is what ultimately kills Leia. The Lucas cut reportedly tested far better than any other cut. But which cut to release was in the end the decision of the head of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy. And so a compromise of sorts between hers and Iger's wishes was released. While the Lucas cut, the one audiences probably would have responded the most favorably to, was locked away in a vault. There it would remain until certain key individuals high up in the Disney food chain saw it at a special screening at Skywalker Ranch, as per Doomcock's reporting. These individuals were reportedly none too pleased that the Lucas cut wasn't the one ultimately released to the public. But if they really liked the Lucas cut more, is there any chance it could, like the Snyder cut, be completed and actually released at some point, as a Disney Plus exclusive if nothing else? Before we assess the probability of the Lucas cut being released, let us take a moment to explore the Snyder cut, as there are some parallels between the two. Both The Rise of Skywalker and Justice League underwent lengthy reshoots and significant retooling, with the original concept practically being rewritten several times over the course of the movie's total production period. This doesn't have to be a problem, not if the final box office tally makes it look like the cost of retooling was the right decision. This did not happen in the case of Justice League. Despite the costs incurred in moving away from Snyder's vision, the movie tanked both at the box office and with reviewers worse than anyone had imagined it ever could, even in their worst nightmares. The numbers spoke loud and clear. Warner Bros. And DC would have been better off putting the Snyder cut in theaters right away, because even if it had performed exactly the same, that would have saved them the $100 million plus expenditure of the Whedon retooling. Jeff Johns and Peter Berg, the ones who had brought Whedon on board in the first place, were fired effective immediately. They never got to bask in the glory of the movies they themselves greenlit: Aquaman, Shazam, and Wonder Woman 1984. The head honcho at the time, Kevin Tsujihara, was later ousted too, albeit for other reasons. But everyone else involved with the decision to retool the movie in such disastrous fashion, including Toby Emmerich himself, were still there. If they were to approve the release of the Snyder cut and it turned out not to be the dumpster fire the Whedon cut was, they'd then look pretty bad for their part in losing Warner Bros. All that money. As such, releasing the Snyder cut would make the key decision makers look bad and could even put their jobs on the line. In short, there was zero motivation within Warner Bros. And DC's operations to release the Snyder cut, and if it had been up to them, it would never have been released. From what we have been told, there is a similar level of resistance against releasing the Lucas cut of The Rise of Skywalker. Kathleen Kennedy is on her way out, but there are other executives who will remain there. If the Lucas cut were to be released, and the response to it were to indicate that spending even more money on the release of the cut was the wrong decision, then their careers could still be cut short. For this reason alone, there is resistance within both Disney and Lucasfilm against releasing the Lucas cut, just as there was against releasing the Snyder cut within Warner. So how did the Snyder cut end up getting announced for release anyway? The decision to release the Snyder cut wasn't made by Warner. Instead, they were overruled by their corporate owner, AT&T. And ironically, Star Wars is a big part of the reason why. November 12th of 2019 saw the release of The Mandalorian, which many view as the only legitimate follow-up to Return of the Jedi. It proved that there is still a demand for good Star Wars, because Disney Plus became one of the major players in the streaming market overnight. Warner and DC's corporate owner AT&T were monitoring that situation very closely. They needed a response, a Mandalorian of their own for their, at the time, upcoming streaming service, HBO Max. What did they have that could be exploited to this end and create a Mandalorian-level buzz? This was when the attention turned to the Snyder Cut. The order to explore the possibilities of a Snyder Cut release and to facilitate it, hence, went down from AT&T to Warner and their DC operation. Everyone there who had previously blocked the Snyder Cut were suddenly ordered to get on board with it. The only reason the Snyder Cut is getting released is because someone higher up in the food chain commanded it. Also, what will be released is a new Snyder Cut based on Snyder's original assembly cut, which will be repackaged as a miniseries, but the point still stands. It is only getting released because someone much higher up in the food chain ordained it, against the will of those who usually make release decisions. So too it is with the Lucas cut of The Rise of Skywalker. Even after Kathleen Kennedy has left, there will be other executives left with a strong personal interest in it remaining locked up in a vault, as releasing it would expose the mismanagement they themselves were party to. Disney also has no tradition of releasing alternate cuts. Case in point, we will never see the Norton cut of The Incredible Hulk, the conflict over which is what led Norton to being fired from the role. As such, don't hold your breath for it. The chances of the Lucas cut ever being released are exceedingly small, but they are not zero. While the decision to release the Lucas cut is unlikely to come from Lucasfilm, as long as there are anyone there with anything to lose from it, such a decision could potentially be forced upon them from higher up. The entire Disney Corporation right now is facing the single greatest threat to its continued existence, certainly in its current form, that it has ever faced. Almost every part of Disney's operation that used to be an asset and the envy of the rest of the industry has become a borderline liability in the current situation. For Disney, these are desperate times, and desperate times call for desperate measures. Radical measures that under normal circumstances would never have even been considered. To this end, another cut is also being considered. Although much less interesting for fans, there have been a stream of rumors since January that a possible Abrams director's cut of The Rise of Skywalker was being considered for release on Disney+. This cut isn't as radically different as the Lucas cut, rather it is an extended version of the release cut, clocking in around 192 minutes. More importantly though, Abrams himself reportedly prefers the extended cut. This does seem to fall in line with later rounds of leaks depicting JJ as more of a victim of circumstance, and the final cut was not his doing, but an edit by committee. Rumors have been swirling that if there was a cut to be released, it would be this 192-minute director's cut. The rumors surrounding the victimhood of Abrams at the hand of Disney are believed to have emanated from inside his camp. It is also more likely because a possible Abrams cut release is more about pleasing filmmaker J.J. Abrams than it is about pleasing the fans. Those rumors also suggest that it is likely Disney would be more on board with pleasing J.J. Abrams than they would Lucas in the end, reportedly to facilitate Abrams continuing to make movies for Disney in between his commitments for Warner. Like with the Lucas cut though, and the Snyder cut before it, the Abrams cut of The Rise of Skywalker officially does not exist. Come back very soon for our next video, where we will explore why for Disney, Star Wars is too big to fail. To ensure it isn't, erasing the sequel trilogy from canon is looking ever more likely. Share your stance on that by picking up one of our badass The Last Jedi is Not Canon t-shirts. The link is in the description. Subscribe and indicate that you want notifications on all videos, so you are notified the moment our video going through Disney's precarious situation goes live. And finally, let us know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.